Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Tuesday, November 13th, 2018, and the time is approximately 7:04 p.m. We have 4 committees tonight, the first one of which is the Committee of the Whole, with 3 agenda items under that. Our first topic will be fire prevention, inspection, and fees. And Councilmember Butler is speaking to that. Thank you.
Thank you, President Nisley. Good evening. This is a request and discussion that was had with the Law Director, Chief Reimer, and City Service Safety Director Andy Stone. I met with them to look at the inclusion and change regarding inspections and fees. The State Fire Marshal is responsible, as well as we can be at the local level, to conduct inspections primarily for the improvement and maintenance of public safety. So there's a proposed updates here to 9.02.06, inspections and fees, specifically looking at construction inspection fees, fire safety inspection fees, and then contracted and extraordinary response services, which would be, as noted, on the occasions when the chief of the department would determine a fire response exceeds the standard fire response service provided by the city's safety forces, then empowering the chief to bill no more than the actual and direct cost to the recipient. There's been some proposed construction and safety inspection fees. New construction fire inspection fees would start off with, we have a $100 final, $50 reinspection, $50 sprinkler, hydrostatic, $50 UG hydro, $50 fire alarm. And then regarding fire safety inspection fees, $50 for an initial annual visit for buildings that occupy space under 10,000 square feet, and a $150 initial annual visit for buildings that occupy space over 10,000 square feet. Then a $0 reinspection, first reinspection after the initial visit, a $25 second reinspection after the initial visit, and then a $50 third reinspection after initial visit. So there's, again, proposals and discussion among that, and open to questions, comments, and the mayor may also have a point or two to add. It's again something that our department is capable of doing and and has done in the past, and this would be an opportunity to empower ourselves at the local level. Anyone, mayor or council? Yes, Councilman Katz.
Yes, thank you. And I'm just thinking about my business and the. When the fire department comes through and does an inspection, there's no fee currently right now, is that correct?
Go ahead.
There is not.
Okay.
No, there hasn't been. I will kind of jump in just for a second on this to give a little bit more historical context. Back when I was in your seat, Councilmember Katsas, I had approached the former fire chief, Robert Troxel, about the possibility for having a fire inspection fee, and where that really came from was from a number of business owners on Court Street, to where prior to the Halloween block party, they were being inspected, but they were being inspected by the State Fire Marshal's office, and after some weeks after the Halloween event, they received an invoice, a bill from the State Fire Marshal, and a couple of the business owners reached out to me and said, I don't mind paying this bill. I don't mind paying an inspection fee. I just don't know why that money is having to go to the state as opposed to staying local. And so this is one way in which we can do that. Mm-hmm. There is obviously time commitment that goes into these inspections to inspect the various businesses. There's 860 plus businesses that are inspected. They aren't all inspected annually. They get to a good number of them. I'd say roughly 100 to 125 annually, and just kind of keep going through the cycle. But all of our firefighters, or at least the vast majority of them, have the certification for doing business inspections or inspections of facilities, to which they actually are paid a little bit extra for having that particular certification. I believe it's $7.50, something like that. But that's an aside to this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But this is not any different than other municipalities across the state that have a fire inspection fee associated with inspecting businesses.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Grace.
I am just a little bit curious about some, for instance, like are there examples that have been provided for the occasion the chief of the department determines a fire response exceeds the standard fire response? Do we have any, like, what does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I don't have an answer to that, and it might require a little bit of digging or research. And the mayor may have a comment or two as well. But
I can get that information for you.
Yeah, I just, as a resident, I would be concerned. Well, what if someone calls for a service, and at what point is it determined beyond a normal response? Mm-hmm. And so, but that was the thing that I wondered about as I read through it.
I will get that information for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions or comments?
Okay.
Thank you, President Isley.
Yes. And we're moving on now to city code fees. And do we have somebody that's providing an explanation of those new fees? Do we have the new fee schedule?
I haven't seen it.
I know this has been discussed in the mayor and auditor's meeting, and I know the service safety director, I can verify that he has been working on fees and looking at them and contacting department chair heads to make sure that the fees are reflecting the amount of time and effort that is required of the city staff. And so there have been a series of suggestions made for increasing some of those fees. And I do believe that all of the fees will now be moved to one specific title within city code so that we can easily find them, easily locate them, and so that citizens going online and looking at the city code can also easily locate those fees.
And one of the things we have identified is that there are a number of fees that the fee itself has been the same for, in some cases, decades. And so this is updating some of the fees as they exist to keep up with current pricing, basically.
Right.
And I'm just going to do one quick check to see if I might have those with me in my other file, but I don't believe I have them here. Oh. No, they're not. They're not listed on the Google Drive for people to be looking at. So so the fees that will be involved will be alarm and activation fees. And so this is for false alarms to which the safety departments need to respond. And there will also be tap connection fees, and these are for new developments, stormwater tap connections. And there will also be water service connection rates that the fees of which have been revised on that one, I believe, also. Solid waste, I'm not sure on the solid waste and recycling if those have actually been increased or not. I do know that on yard waste, where the fees had been $25, they will now be $50. And in developments, it looks like the fee will be raised from $100 to $150. There will also be new construction fire inspection fees, and then the fire inspection fees we just mentioned. And then also permits for work required, as in a sidewalk permit. And then we have vendor's license fees also included within this. Also taxicab, license fees, solicitors or peddlers license fees. And then also then fees for minor lot splits and then lot splits in subdivisions. So those, in this case, minor lot split has been increased from $80 to $100. Subdivisions, preliminary, they've been increased from $500 to $600. And final has been increased from $500 to $600. And likewise, there has been same increase in planned unit developments. Sign permit fees will also be the permanent and temporary. Permanent sign fees will be increased from $75 to $100. Temporary sign permits will be increased from $40 to $50. For excavation, an application fee has been increased from $50 to $80. New construction permit has been increased from $120 to $150. Accessory structure permit has been increased from $50 to $75. A zoning board variance request has been increased from $50 to $75. And then off-street parking, I'm not sure that there's a fee increase on that, but the citation fee. And then zoning map amendments has been increased from $100 to $200. There have been also some increases then on inspection fees. Expirations and renewals have been increased, the flat fee from $25 to $50. Then we have rental permit fees that will be increased from $100 to $150. From $60 to $75 per unit for over 10 units in one building, from $80 to $100 per unit for over 10 units in more than one building, and then $40 per bedroom for rooming houses. And so those are most of the fees. A dwelling unit inspection fee has been increased from $105 to $110. And then there are fees identified for application fee for a special use permit, such as a new tower or a modification or co-locating. Yes, Councilman.
I just want to add something that these are proposed changes. They're not yet set in stone completely. That's why they're presented to council. Get input from council and others. Decide whether or not the fee structure should be tweaked a little bit here and there, up or down.
Sure.
But I think one other thing that's going to come out of this is that we're consolidating the hodgepodge of fees that are scattered all through the city code and through the administrative, because we have fees that are established by council and then fees established by the administration, whoever may be in power at that time. So at least we're consolidating and figuring out what and who controls what, and codifying it, finally putting it out there in Title I where we'll know just by looking. Say, oh yeah, I know what that fee is, and this is where it goes, and so on.
Sure.
So
I
think that's a good reform right there.
Certainly an improvement. And I think we have our Clerk of Council, Debbie Walker, in part to thank for a lot of the work done on this, so thank you. And what we can do is a follow-up so that it is on that drive so that all council members can physically review the document. We could either put the draft ordinance or the actual chart where it shows, I think there's a one-page summary chart that shows with a line out, and that will be helpful.
There is. And again, I can't stress this enough that for several of these fees, they have not changed in many years. And so from an administrative fee standpoint, some of these fees need to increase.
Great. Are there any other questions or comments from council members? Okay. The last item for Committee of the Whole is what's called a subordination agreement. It doesn't happen very often, but we have processed these through the city before every few years. And what has happened, this is for an address 23 Hanlon Avenue, and this residence the owners of this property were assisted with a CHIP down payment assistance rehab fees back in 2011. They are now working to refinance this, and the lender, who is identified as the credit union, is going to require that they have the first lien on the title. So that means the city, even though they assisted with the down payment with the CHIP grant, the city must sign an agreement saying that they are willing to be the subordinate person listed on the lien. And well, they'll have to actually subordinate the mortgage. So in order to do this, we need an ordinance from the city, and that authorizes the mayor to sign the subordination agreement. So that will be the piece of legislation that will be coming forward. And then at a later date, council then ratifies the mayor's signature on that form. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to Finance and Personnel Committee. And we may have a record number of items. I think there are 9 items that Councilmember Reisner has. And so the members of the Finance and Personnel Committee, Chair Reisner, then Councilperson Butler and Crowell. And though we have the council members seated here who are on that committee to make it clear who's doing the presenting and asking preliminary questions, council members or audience members can also ask questions too from the audience. So.
Thank you, Madam President. As you say, we have several bullet points here, but this being that time of the year when budgets and appropriations all seem to converge, it's not all that surprising. First item, 2019 budget. Obviously, we don't have the city budget has been formed just yet, but I'm assuming that the various department heads have gotten their parts together. It's all being consolidated. The spreadsheets are being put together. And would either the auditor or the mayor care to touch on the subject?
Well, I can just kind of reiterate what you just mentioned. We're about 95% at the 95% solution level at this point. My executive assistant, Patty Whitmer, is the one who collates all this, compiles all the information, puts it on a master spreadsheet. We've been working with the auditor's office to make sure we're getting this done efficiently, and then we will likely sit down again soon, and likely with yourself as well, Councilmember Reisner, since you're the chair of finance, and go through the budget a few more times before we bring it forward to council. But we're getting close.
Auditor?
I just feel the need to put this out there. My office has been working on this since about August. Since I've come into office, we've started doing the personnel part of that. That's kind of the most important part of the budget. You need to pay your people, then see how much you have to spend on supplies, etc. And so Laura Kreider has been the one who's done that, plus all the budgets. And then, she's reached out and asked people to do it. And it's kind of hard sometimes to do it that far in advance, but as you can see, it's a long process. Our expense reports are like 40 pages long for the entire city, listing everything that we spend money on. And so she sends that out, asks for feedback. It goes to the mayor. He asks for feedback from his department heads and supervisors so they can look at that. Because most of what we're looking at is what was done before. And so if there are big changes, they all have to review it. So we're pretty well done with all of that. And as the mayor said, Patty Whitmer is the one who's been putting it together to go over. But yeah, I feel like we're a little bit behind this year, but maybe not really. There's always a lot of last minute stuff depending on how much money we think we're going to have and all that. But yeah, like I said, Laura's been working on that since summertime.
So you'll have it all wrapped up by next Monday?
Yeah.
We're pushing.
Well,
And I'd like to echo what the auditor was saying, that, yeah, Laura, she had those to us August.
She's actually the one who's put the budgets together and then sent them with adjustments for the salary increases, any cost increases that we know of, and then put it out there and sent general reminders to people and things like that. So it is a big process, I guess, is what I want everyone to understand, that it does take a lot of time.
Yeah. Are there any departments or divisions that are a little bit behind? Not
departments, in terms of personnel. We still have some line items, though, where we're sitting there trying to plug in the numbers for those. But like I said, we're hoping to have that wrapped up, this week.
Great.
Which is 3 more days, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Boy, time goes by. It's changing from daylight savings time to Eastern Standard. We lose that hour, and this messes up everything. The next item is 2019 medical insurance stop loss and third-party administrator. I understand from this afternoon we're staying with the same third-party administrator as we've had before, and our stop loss insurance for some catastrophic payment that has been set.
Yeah, I think that the contracts, I think the service safety director said the contracts have been taken care of.
So all we need is council approval. That's all we'll do. Right. So we'll have an ordinance and we'll get that done. 2019 staffing, I think we have information on our Google Drive. In fact, it's a big spreadsheet, 2019 staffing. And being old-fashioned, I had our clerk print me out a copy because I don't like to squint. Changes on, you can see in the spreadsheet are marked in yellow. First page, land and buildings, landscaper, full-time equivalent is at 0.73. Not quite full-time, but what's that considered between half and full? Three-quarter time. Okay. Sort of like a March. Okay. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Then we have an internal services and systems administration, full-time equivalent. Then part-time seasonal employees. There's quite a lot of changes on that one, so I'm not going to go through all of them. I want all council members to take a look on their copy on their drive to see what's going on here. But there's some definite strikeouts and changes. Numbers increased or decreased. So it's worth looking at to understand what's going on with our city employees. Auditor?
Can I just add quickly that you had to leave right at the end of our meeting, and but Laura and I did go over this with Andy, and we had some questions about some of it. So the final one, Andy will be making changes, will be a little bit different.
Okay, that's excellent.
Than this, but you get the idea what's going on there.
All right. Madam President?
I do have a question then. So I'm seeing that there were the 3/4-time cemetery workers that you referred to that landscape in the cemetery.
Yes.
That's now under lands and buildings, and so those are three-quarter-time positions where there have been 3 full-time positions in another department. So it's actually a reduction, or are we shifting and somebody else is increasing part-time?
And that's going to change back a little bit.
Okay.
Both of these departments are under the lands and buildings director and out of the general fund. But if we want to track our actual maintenance costs at the cemetery, we need to leave that second person in there, because the way it is, the seasonal workers are limited. It has one seasonal worker, and they're very limited in the number of days they can work a year. And really, year-round work at the cemetery. It's not just summer mowing, it's winter shoveling, et cetera, et cetera. So one of those landscapers is going to go back into the cemetery line. It's all paid out of the general fund.
Okay.
But we talked to Andy about that. And then we don't really have these landscaper positions in our pay schedule, so they need to be added to that pay grade in there. I believe Andy said they're going to go in at the lowest pay grade, but we're still working off of that one that was done in 2016. So that would be one.
I think it's important also to note that when we're talking about cemetery maintenance, so on, we're actually talking in the plural. We have cemeteries that we have to maintain. It's not just one, it's several. And those people have to get around to all of them. And frankly, I don't know how they're doing it.
It's a lot. I don't know either. I think the Union Street Cemetery is a lot bigger than I realized for a long time, just from driving by it.
Yeah.
A lot.
I believe it's 15 acres. I could be wrong, but it is larger than the West State Street Cemetery.
Oh, yeah.
But it looks great.
Yeah.
And I have to give a big thank you to those who are taking care of the cemetery, especially having come off of the Veteran Day services. And anyway, if I could, just to mention real quick too, the city has 2, and there's also 2 in the township, which the township is responsible for. So there's 4 cemeteries within the township itself.
Any questions or comments on this?
I'll just mention briefly, I had the same question that President Nisley did, so thank you for addressing and clarifying that as well. I was curious about that.
I appreciate that question, because that jumped out at us too, that they need to keep one of those part-time people in the cemetery budget.
Okay, I'll sort my papers out here. I think if we've covered that, our next item would be the 2019 non-union pay/benefits ordinance. And I know I was around for this this afternoon for about 2 hours. It's on the Google Drive now, the latest updated, corrected, revised edition. So this is a work in progress. It's a living document, and we may still find an issue somewhere before it's all done. But it's about 24 pages, 28 pages long. But it's getting there. It's looking through here. Is there any? There are changes. Obviously, that's why we do this every year. And I would ask members of council to go through, look at the strikeouts and the additions in yellow and bold. Is there any particular one item or?
There's maybe a couple.
Okay.
But I wanted to point out too that we are working off of the clerk's copy. However, I believe Andy made a few changes before we even came to our meeting, just clarification. But one thing that we're doing is reinstituting the bonus if you don't take our insurance, if you can prove you have insurance through it somewhere else. That had been taken out for several years. That's going back in there. And a donation of sick leave for employees who haven't reached a year, new employees who haven't reached a year of service. You're not supposed to use any of your vacation time until you've worked here for a year. And so we're going to make it a limited exception for people who need to go out on maternity leave for some donation of sick time. I'd say those are 2 of the biggest ones that
that's on.
I'd say are kind of new. Well, no, there's one more.
Okay.
The shift differential.
Yes. I have to admit, every time I hear that phrase, I think of an automatic transmission. I don't know why.
Yeah.
What page is that, the shift differential on?
That's towards the back. I just went
I'm looking
there.
through the manual.
25.
Page 25. There it is.
I can talk about it. I think Andy or maybe even the mayor could talk about it better, but we have just a very few employees whose regular schedule does not fall within our kind of 7 to 4 or 5 Monday through Friday shifts. And we're talking about non-union employees. The union members already are given, there's an allowance for shift differential for the different shifts that they work. And so these employees who are required to work Saturdays and Sundays, such as the litter control officers, that's their schedule, and they were hired to do that. But I would have a hard time doing that myself, having to work every weekend and things like that. So it's just a minimum amount per hour. Like I said, like all the union people get when they work evenings and weekends.
Madam President?
We did have a question on this one earlier when the clerk and I were looking at this, on that shift differential. It calls them non-union classified employees. And so my question is about classified.
I don't know off the top of my head if that word should be in there or not.
We can double check on that.
Yeah, there was one person at REC and the 2 litter control officers are the 3 that Andy mentioned. So I don't know that they're all classified.
And I didn't see any designation of that in the non-union staffing listing. Yeah.
I'll look into that.
And the other one is whoever has final version of this document, page 9, I think accrue is spelled, it's got a typo in it.
Oh, that's the only typo we found was the one. No, where is it on page 9?
It's the yellow text.
Oh.
Accrue is with 2 C's, I think.
Oh, accumulate or accrue?
Accrue.
The yellow part on page 9?
Or E. On item E.
Maybe you have the latest version, because I don't have that.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
I see it.
Maybe the mayor and I have the old one.
Yeah, one of us can pass it along.
We've got the new one.
The new one is on the Google.
The new one's on the Google Drive, and that's what I opened up.
Yeah.
So that's got it's somehow there's a typo in it. Okay. Thank you.
And I would encourage council, as Auditor Heck mentioned on page 12, is that language for the insurance, the bonus.
And it seems reasonable. And a good description. It seemed clear when I read through
It
it.
was a recommendation from our team.
Okay.
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. I just briefly want to applaud and toot the horn of the city when looking through this. It's a very big document. There's a lot to digest. But we have things included in here like voluntary fitness incentive program, where full-time, three-quarter time, permanent part-time employees shall receive free recreation passes to the community center. That type of incentive and programming, I think, is again speaks largely to the kind of community that we're hoping to create here, and the emphasis on health and wellness. As well as similarly following that, the tuition reimbursement, getting, being incentivized to, in the city giving back and saying that we value your knowledge, we value what you have to offer, and encouraging that. And so I just, again, these are small things that mean a lot to people, and I think our city does its best to try to be the kind of employer that I would want to work for. So thank you for everyone that's involved in a part of that.
You're welcome. And to your point, in the long run, that certainly benefits the city. One of our full-time landscaper was just recently received his certification as an official arborist. So now the city of Athens has 2 arborists, and some of that came through. It was all education.
Thank you.
Are we finished with the? No. Okay.
Well, actually,
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
One more comment. I'll just acknowledge too that this is a very challenging group to address because our non-union employees vary. Mm-hmm. It can be a clerk, it can be a captain, it can be our mayor. I mean, it's a very diverse group when we're looking at who this umbrella covers. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to look at and digest here, and the challenges of trying to meet the needs of all those employees.
Right.
And they don't have a voice for them the way that the union does. And so, we have to do our homework to look into this because they don't have that same representative that our union employees have. So we have to do our homework here as well.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to touch on, since we're talking about non-union pay and benefits, at our last committee meeting on October 22nd, I brought up the topic of compensation for elected officials, and it was suggested that some sort of spreadsheet be brought together of other communities, possibly our size, population, so on. And such a spreadsheet now exists on our Google Drive. It's there to. Oh, that's it right there.
This one. Okay, thank you.
So this is now that the council is aware of it. I urge that the members look at these different compensation rates in different communities and see what seems to fit along with Athens. To get a better feel of one is an increase in compensation necessary, and if so, what would be appropriate, given all the various factors we have in the city. I have my opinion, but I would urge other members to give me theirs so that we can get an ordinance together and get this passed by the end of the year. Anyone like to speak to it? Either my esteemed colleagues
or questions to clarify. You said a few more cities were added. Did I hear that or no? This is a new document.
We had correct. It's a new document that our Human Resources Director received from the Ohio Municipal League, because if you remember, a few weeks ago, the document I had was rates from back in 2013 or 14. Yes. Okay. And these are and the header is wrong up at the top, but they are reflective of the rates as of 2016.
Okay, thank you.
So as close as we can get it, or is available. Comments?
Still digesting.
Okay.
So it's a range. So we have Dover, Ohio, as a part-time. City council employees there are paid $7,200. In Lancaster, they're paid $9,400. In Warren, they're paid $11,109. However, it looks like they're full. Yeah, I'm not sure on Parma. It looks like they're full-time at $20,000. So it's a whole range, whether it's part-time or full-time. And yeah. In the past 2 years, it looks, or 3 years, we have worked through with 2% pay raise increases for the elected officials.
That's correct. My own personal opinion was staying with that 2% is probably appropriate, given the ranges here. There's nothing else on that topic. Moving right along, 2019 Public Defender contract. Most people know we have a municipal court, and I believe the last figure I saw, the number of cases that go before the municipal court, both within the city and the county, is well over 1,000. So that's a good, 3 or 4 a day if you average it out. I mean, that's a lot. So for those people who cannot afford a lawyer, they have the Public Defenders Program. They send us a contract, and we basically say, well, okay, I guess that's what we'll pay. A lot of this is controlled by the county. We don't have a lot of control over this. But I believe the contract has been put together. Otter?
I was just going to add, after our meeting today, and we questioned those contracts, I looked them up and when I got to my office, and we do annual contracts that go through December 31st, because someone said they thought maybe we do these every 6 months, but we don't really. But the problem is, I don't think the Public Defender's Office gets their money or allocation from the state until spring. And so we're often doing addendums midway through the year. So that might happen. I don't know if you remember the conversation last year. We just had a lot of going around because they needed an increase after we had
That's right.
the contract and things like that. So that might happen again, but it is an annual contract for us. I just think they're not on the same fiscal year that we are. Of course, we have to do that really if we can because that's our fiscal year.
That's right.
So
State
it
of
might
Ohio
change.
says we'll have a court, and that's
Well, so whatever you do might change.
So we'll need a copy of that contract in order to get an ordinance together. Do we have one yet, clerk?
Yes.
Okay, we got it. We're efficient here. Next, union contracts. ASME 2403 contract approval, and also I believe the contract with the communications officers is also set for approval by council. So we can get an ordinance together for Monday and approve those, give our stamp of approval to the contracts that have been ratified by the rank and file. Next, appropriation / TIF transfer. We're TIFing again. Mayor, you're the expert on TIFs.
This would be for our East State Street
Yes.
tax incremental financing TIF area.
Which I understand goes all the way out to the Athena Grand, but no further. Is that right?
I thought it went to Family Dollar or Dollar General.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, but then I got shot down for mentioning that, so I don't think so.
I think one of the big parts about this transfer is this is for to reimburse our street rehab fund for money that was spent this summer on that street. On the other end, it goes to the interchange, as people might hopefully realize now. All of that work is done by the state. The highway and the exits and entrances are done by the state. And the TIF absolutely ends at the first entrance onto East State Street. But there was a lot of work done on East State Street, and I thought the amount was $36,000. Does that ring a bell with anybody?
That sounds right.
So, so that money will be transferred from the TIF fund to reimburse the street rehab fund.
Okay. Other appropriations? Do we have a list of anything else that's going to be coming up for Monday that we need to move around? Okay.
Not at this time.
Sewer fees and sewer debt allocation. That was discussed today. Should I bring it up or?
Sure.
Thanks. Okay. Let's see. We got two sheets here. We're talking about sewer base rates, I believe.
Oh, that's weird.
Costs are going up.
Costs are going up.
Sewer fund needs more money. Everyone has a base rate, and then anything additional on top of that. And we do annual raises that is just a percentage of
Based on consumption.
Right.
Right.
On the actual consumption, they'll both go up. And actually, the percentage on consumption just went up September 1st.
Yes.
In January, the base rates will also go up. We've made a lot of improvements at our sewer plant, millions and millions of dollars worth, and we have to be able to pay our loans back and pay for our services and all the other things that we're required to do by the EPA, which often change and cost money to implement. And so I feel like the service safety director and the director of EPW and everyone else over there has done a lot of work trying to calculate what they really need. And I don't believe they're asking for more than they do absolutely need. So there'll be a big chart, and I'm sure that will be provided to council and everyone before the meeting. But we've been talking about the sewer rates for a while because sewer fund is definitely tighter than it should be right now. And
well, one of the issue, there's a couple of things as putting the funds in with the problem here in terms of cash on hand. We have more debt, and the debt has to be serviced. Maybe you can't get out of that. You owe money, you pay it. But the revenues that we draw on are based upon the amount of water that we sell, and we sell that to our households and businesses and so on. And our biggest customer, if you want to look at it that way, is Ohio University. And Ohio University has been going through a series of conservation steps, finding leaks and making changes in how they generate energy and building new dorms and with more efficient plumbing and so on. So the amount of consumption from Ohio University has declined, which that means the revenue from OU has declined, which impacts our bottom line. Well, our debts are what they are. Our expenses are what they are. But our revenues decline. There's not another big consumer out there like OU to make up the shortfall. So that's the bind that we're in. It's kind of a sad thing. I mean, you want to conserve water. You want to be efficient with it. You don't want to waste it. But at the same time, we got to pay our bills. It's a quandary.
Well, and let me add, I mean, just aside from that, I mean, we're going to need to increase these. And it's the base rate that we feel is what pays that debt service.
That's correct.
By and large. And so that's all we're talking about.
Right.
Not
consumption.
Not the consumption, which is, the 100,000 or the 1,000-gallon increments. That won't be changing, but the base rate needs to change again. And you mentioned this earlier, and it's vitally accurate, is that we've got to pay that debt service.
Well, that's what the base rate should be. It should be to provide service to the debt and capital improvement. That's the thing that it should be doing. And then from our consumption, then that starts paying our fee, our maintenance, to keep the system up and running. Operations. Yeah. So that's the way you run a business.
And so we do have the proposed chart. Excuse me.
Yeah, Madam President.
Yeah, we do have the proposed chart that we could share on the Google Drive with council members, so they're aware.
I think the assistant, the engineer wanted to tweak a couple of figures. I'm trying to think which ones they were. There were so many that they presented this afternoon.
Yeah.
But I think the question that you had, what was rather disturbing that I saw that even though if these changes go into effect, and that's why we're discussing them, if they go into effect, at the end of the next year, they could still be slightly in the red, which is not a good place to be. No matter how much it is, I'd rather see a surplus, but even with this, because of our costs and their debt. So
Well, and there could be a shift too,
Oh, there could be.
within consumption by the entity that you mentioned earlier, which we are seeing a slight increase. We did see a drop over the summer. Certainly saw a drop in use, which is not a bad thing.
No.
You know, from an environmental standpoint, being water conservative is a good thing.
Yeah.
But
Well, there also, OU has plans to build a new chiller operation on Mill Street somewhere in that area. I'm not sure. I'm not going to get into that debate, but wherever it would be built, it would still be a water consumer. Now, it won't be that great. It's not like another, I don't know, a swimming pool or something to that extent, but it would be another customer. So that's where we stand on that, I guess. One thing we did talk about a little bit this afternoon was the allocation of the fees. Were we going to keep those the same at 70-30, or was there going to be a slight tweaking there?
I think that's it. Right now it's 25-75.
Yeah.
So we're going to put 30% of our revenue and certain added fees into the debt fund.
Okay.
Rather than just 25%.
Okay. Member Crowell had a question?
I thought Madam President had a question.
You clarified it exactly. I wanted to know what the percentages were between the regular sewer fee and the sewer debt fund so that the public would understand that we're doing a split on it.
Let's see. And the last LPA payment, ODOT resurfacing of State Route 56 within the city. I understand that ordinance will need to be suspended because they're ready to go now, as the state usually does. They tell us at the last minute that they need the funds. So,
and we have it.
And we got them. So Monday we'll introduce, we'll do a reading, suspend, and hopefully all members of council will go along with it. And we can get this thing going. Any other items? I can't think of. I pretty much exhaust everything.
Okay. Thank you. We now have the Planning and Development Committee, but unfortunately 2 of our council members who serve on that committee are not here tonight. But we do have Council Member Reisner, who's on the Planning and Development.
Lucky me.
And the mayor has graciously said that he will speak to the licensure and land use agreement item with Ohio University to explain that.
I'm all alone.
Oh, and I'm sorry, Councilmember Grace. I'm sorry. You are on this committee. I neglected to write it down.
She's definitely there.
Unless I have the list in front of me, I'm forgetful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam President. We'll have our esteemed mayor here to speak to this issue, licensure and land use agreement with Ohio University.
Absolutely. This is something that we've been working on for quite some time. As a matter of fact, I think we've been working on it since 2016, at least in concept. As council may know, that Ohio University owns a significant amount of property along the river, just south of the community center, as well as, I don't know if it's still called the Athens Mall or not, but what used to be the Athens Mall on East State Street. I believe it's about 16 acres of land. A lot of it is overgrown with invasives. A lot of there's also a rather large feral cat population that lives in that area, and other things and it's right along the bike path. The idea was to work with the university to see if we could utilize that property for passive recreation and to clean things up down there along the river. Now, the Hawking Conservancy is still responsible for 20 feet from the river's edge up for maintaining, clearing, or mowing on occasion. This, on the other hand, would give us the opportunity, as I mentioned, to clean it up and use it as a usable recreation space. One possibility is that we could put several park benches down there and create a space that people could enjoy right along the river. It would certainly open up the view shed from the bike path and from the community center and look towards the river, which at this point you cannot see the river flowing by. It would not be to remove any of the trees that are along there. Again, this would be mostly for the ground vegetation and invasives that are along there. Again, there was a lot of other ideas that we've been floating around. If we're able to enter into this land use agreement with Ohio University, to where a possibility is if we could find the right line of sight areas to put in, possibly a ultimate frisbee area down there, or a leashed dog walking area through there. There's a lot of possibilities, but it's just being able to better utilize that particular parcel, which, as council is aware, it is in the floodway. It is otherwise unusable space. And it is Ohio University's property. So this would be a land use agreement with Ohio University for an extended period of time. I don't see the actual length of time on here.
15 years.
15 years.
Would we, the city, be responsible for mowing and other upkeep of the land?
We would, which is currently not being done at all.
Right.
So, yes.
I seem to remember years ago I was seeing hay being mowed out down through there and bales. Was it, maybe there's a different section I'm thinking of, but
I don't know for sure. Memorizing there. I will mention that HAPCAP has a funding mechanism for brush removal, and we are exploring that with Ted Linscott, who is a township trustee, but also is working with HAPCAP on this particular program for tree and brush removal. And again, we're not looking at it for the tree removal aspect, but for the brush removal.
How big a parcel is this?
I believe it's 16 acres.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean that we'd be clearing all 16 acres. We would certainly be clearing the portion that is in line with the city's community center proper.
Well, I've seen where in some communities they're actually letting some land go back to meadow with native species rather than these invasive, like these wild olives, or that just sort of pop up and start growing everywhere. But it seems like that would be a good, I don't know, idea for that kind of land. I'm all for it. Sounds like a good idea. Oh, great.
I know there have at times been homeless individuals that are in the brush off the bike path there, and just I don't know if there's anyone currently utilizing that space, but I do think that that's something that we as a city need to be mindful of, and that's just what came to mind was as I remember walking and biking that section of the path. Sometimes there are signs saying that no one is to stay there, but then sometimes there are clearly signs that people have been camping. And so I just think that just being mindful of anyone who might be utilizing that space and being sure that we're sensitive to that, and hopefully connecting them with services that could assist them in finding a better location.
I agree with you wholeheartedly with the latter part of your comment. I understand that there are people during the summer months who will camp down there, or when foliage is in full bloom.
Right.
We're going to be taking a real hard look at that whole property once the leaves are all down and it's nothing but thicket, and we'll be able to see what can be removed. And certainly we won't be doing anything with anybody living down there.
Right.
But to your point, we find that all throughout the city, quite honestly, in terms of people.
It's something that is easy to sometimes overlook in our city, but it certainly is here. And since we're talking about a particular place where I have observed homeless populations, I just wanted to bring that up as a reminder. This season of entering Thanksgiving, and encourage and remind myself to actively be thankful and give and help those that I'm able to. So.
Well said. I don't have any more questions.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to Transportation Committee, chaired by Councilmember Katsas and Councilmember Grace and Councilmember Crowell.
Wait 1 second here. Let me know when you're ready. Okay. We just have one bullet point tonight under Transportation Committee, and Member Crowell will be actually speaking to mobile vending, so I feel like I'm kind of taking a vacation, so please.
Thank you, Member Katsas. I would like to advise council and the public that the ad hoc mobile vending committee has met and has reviewed the current ordinance, has reviewed some of the suggestions that Member McGee made in the spring and early summer for changes to the vendor ordinance. And we've also looked closely at the new fire safety laws that come effect January 1st. I've been in communication with Service Safety Director Andy Stone and the Mayor and Code Director Rick Sirois. And we're realized that the solution to try to improve both the parking situation, particularly on East Union Street, as well as the vending situation, requires some physical changes in terms of painting of our spots, particularly to be in compliance with the new fire safety regulations. We last met on Sunday, and we came to a realization that I'm not sure the city has fully understood, so I'm going to have to get back with Mr. Sirois and Director Stone, because the fire safety law stipulates not only that there must be 7 feet from a mobile buggy from one side of a van or a trailer to the next one, but it says that the city can decide that these can be 7 feet apart. But a trailer or a mobile vending van must be 10 feet from a non-vending vehicle. So this becomes very complicated, and we have the situation that we have in Athens currently, where we could have a vendor parked in a vending spot after 4 p.m. on a given day, and a member of the public come in and park at a spot after 4 p.m. at the adjacent spot. So if we don't have the necessary width between these spaces, then we're not in compliance with that 10-foot regulation between a vending unit and a non-vending vehicle. So I have talked with Director Stone and Mr. Sirois about how we can paint spots that will be larger than the current ones, that will have a sort of hatched area between them that would allow for this buffer for the mobile vending. But it doesn't figure out that problem of after 4 p.m. somebody coming into that spot. So it comes down to a lot of complications. The Athens Mobile Vending Association was hoping for to propose some changes rather quickly. They understand now the infrastructure changes that are necessary and a lot of the things that will have to go into a major rehaul of the ordinance. So next Monday, I will be presenting slight changes to the current ordinance. And those changes will really only change the license period, because the current ordinance calls for a January 1 to December 31st licensing period. Director Stone believes that some of those infrastructure changes can happen in the summer, that when we have the painting crew out and we can do some of those changes and we can do that work in the summer. So we will, the ordinance that I will propose on next Monday will propose a monthly system. And not only will this help us to realign with a possible new, different changes to the ordinance come the summer, when we actually have these physical spots figured out, but it will also open up some of these spots over the coming, certainly January and February, where the vendors don't believe they have any likelihood of making much money in January and February in particular. So if we do it on a monthly and the vendors do not register their businesses for January or February, then all those spots are open for public parking. Going to a monthly system, and I need to discuss this with the code office, might perhaps be an administrative duty that they will have to take on. We've looked into infrastructure in terms of flip signs that will have a simple hinge on them that can be locked and unlocked when a vendor has reserved a spot for a given month. The Athens Mobile Vending Association also believes that in most cases, vendors will not be choosing sporadic months. It's going to be a system of quarters, really, where they're going to want to vend. So it won't be a case where there'll be vendors changing every month, but probably every 3 months. We did look at a quarterly system. In the end, we came down to maybe this initial period being a monthly system. I was not aware of the overall fee schedule changes, so I will want to review that information and look at how that might change. We went back to the original ideas that Mr. McGee had presented, which was simply taking that full amount, which was $1,500 for a yearly license, dividing it by 12 and doing $125 a month. I will look at the new fees proposed and look at the history of what those fees have been. I do know that this ordinance dates from 2013, so it's only been about 5 years, not decades, but I don't know if those fees have changed. I also know that the fees are based upon what the meters might make, and that will change. The mayor is shaking your head. For those at home who can't see, nodding his head, excuse me. And so we will have to look at that. I don't know what the city safest director has or what that area of Union, I know that there's different zones for parking rates in the city. And I don't know what East Union Street, what zone that would be.
It would be, again, a high-use zone, and so that would likely go to the $1 an hour rate. And you're correct, Member Crowell, because I was part of that ordinance. As a matter of fact, I was working on that ordinance. And that rate is based on 6 days a week and what the meters, the revenue generated at each meter during that 6 day a week period. The other thing I would strongly encourage you and council to think about, because I've given a lot of thought to this in terms of vending on West Union, East Union, is that the meters, by and large, in the uptown area, meter enforcement is Monday through Saturday, not Sunday. And therefore, to me, I view those vending spaces, since they're dedicated to the vendors 7 days a week as opposed to 6 days a week, it doesn't make sense that they're reserved for an entity that by and large isn't there anyway on a Sunday, yet by law someone can't park there and use it who might be going to church in the uptown area or going anywhere in the uptown area on Sundays. So I would encourage council to look at that to see about changing those to where those are spaces, and whatever you land on, that there's spaces that can be used, again, Monday through Saturday, but then Sunday they're opened up, as with all of the other meters in the uptown area, to where you don't pay the meter on a Sunday.
Well, thank you, Mayor. That was one of the ideas that Councilmember McGee had in an earlier proposed ordinance that the vending association was comfortable with. Sunday is not their big vending day, and there's no reason not to restrict that. They could still come and feed the meter on a Sunday if they decided to be there, but that open Sundays up to the public as well. The Athens Vending Association has also requested the City Council administration to think about other areas in the city where they might possibly open some vending spots. I've had discussions with people about this. There is nothing that will be proposed next Monday for this first change that will talk about new vending areas. But it is a conversation that I encourage the city continues to have. From my standpoint, I would like to deal with the parking situation and the people who would like to utilize reserve vending spots that are not being used for public parking. And I'd also like to support the food vendors in our town. And that may mean thinking about a little bit more of a diverse situation, a few more opportunities for them to do their business. On that same token, there are some reservations about that, and I understand those, and I want to work with the community and the local businesses about what works for them. On that note, I visited pretty much every late-night food operation in the Mill, East State, Court Street, up to Washington area, to have beginning conversations with owners or general managers when I could about the possibility of vending being opened up in other areas of the city. And I will continue that conversation, and I will continue the conversation with the mayor and other, not just food establishments, brick and mortar establishments in this area. And hopefully we'll keep moving forward on this. Mayor?
To that end, and I know that, Member Crowell, you're aware of this, that as long as they are granted permission by a property owner who has property in which a vending vehicle can situate itself, and a great example is the Munch Box that still is able to use Dale's BP parking lot area, that is permissible, as long as they go through code and health department and get the certifications or permits that they need, that with a property owner, with their permission, they can vend there. And there are a number of parking lots in the uptown area to where, again, I've encouraged our vending community to reach out to the owners of said parking lots to see if that's a possibility. So again, that's important for anyone who's watching tonight to understand, is that another great example is Little Fish Brewing Company, as well as Devil's Kettle Brewing Company, both of which have vendors who vend on their properties because, again, that is a permissible operation. But again, you still have to go and get your vending permit, and you still have to get be permitted or approved by the health department. But that's a possibility, and in particular in the area that you were just describing on the north end of Court Street.
Yeah, thank you. Member Grace?
Just for clarification, should the ordinance be changed so that the spaces are not reserved for vendors on Sundays, but a spot is open and the vendor parks there, they would not need to feed the meter because the meters aren't monitored on Sundays. So, correct. And I just wanted to thank you for all the work with a very diverse group of very interested parties. And so thank you for the efforts you're putting into this, Member Crowell.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry that Member McGee is not here today. He got this ball rolling, and There were a lot of good ideas, not completely accepted, but we're working off of some of his drafts, so I'll have to.
Hopefully he's watching.
Okay, good. Thank you, Member Mickey. Anything else? Mr. Butler?
Thank you. Kent Butler, 131 2nd Street, Councilmember, First Ward. To echo similarly what Councilmember Grace said, thank you, Councilmember Crowell, for addressing this and working with the vendors. I do think it's a legitimate request, and I think there's validation on their part for us as a community to look into other sites within the city for vending. Having been a former, full disclosure, having worked in the burrito buggy years ago as an undergraduate student, when Baker Center was, which is now Schoonover, if I'm saying that correctly, new Baker Center at the end of Court Street has changed the foot traffic pattern. Likewise, has some of the newer bars and evening locations that students like to frequent. So there has been a change in the dynamics of uptown. So I think it is a valid request on their part for us to look into that. So again, I applaud your willingness to dig into this and look, and I think it's important for us to consider some of these concerns. Thank you.
Mr. Kotzies?
Yes, thank you. I'll close it out playing devil's advocate. We're only talking about a block, maybe 2 blocks of distance. And like Member Butler just mentioned, it was different, back in the in the 80s, the early 90s. But I would also say that at that time, those vendors were there every day, and if you don't have the continuity of always being there, always being dependable, there's a good chance that your business is going to slip because people are going to stop going to that location because they don't know if you're going to be there or not. The other thing that I feel is something that could be looked into is just marketing. This is our vendor spot. This is where people go. This is where the carts are, and really just kind of push it out as the place to go. Not try to look where we're going to try to find the optimal spot for those, the vendor that is requesting a slightly different model. Additionally, actually just today, I was with my daughter around the 3 o'clock hour at a business right at the corner of Union and Court Street. And I'll tell you, the traffic volume there of pedestrians, off the chart. I mean, she said, wow, she had not seen that many people. So, I mean, we still have a lot of traffic in that neighborhood. I'm not up there at 2 o'clock at night, so I can't really speak to that. But I can say that there is more opportunity in that current location right now.
Thank you. Please.
I'm Rob Delac, 124 Morris Avenue here in the city. I'd just like to encourage the city to consider these kind of options, as you've discussed, Member Crowell. I think that broadening the opportunities for vending is something that will only help the city ultimately. It will help our vendors. Limiting them into a small area, I don't think isn't the approach many other cities are taking. I think the comparable cities, for example, Kent, Ohio, opened up their mobile vending options for their local vendors in 2011, and they have a much more vibrant food truck environment than we do here. They're a very similar city in a lot of ways to us, similar size, have a big university, but there's something else different there, and I think one of the keys is that they've made it more flexible for those vendors to go to the places where it makes sense for them to be, where the customers are. So I think we really should consider those kind of options and add options, make it as flexible as possible, but maybe ask for something in return as well. So, for example, do we have any data on who is vending, where, and when, so we could maybe better manage this. We probably don't. Maybe we should be asking for an exchange for broadening the options for the vendors to ask for them to report information to us about when they're vending and where. And maybe even ask them to do other things like put out garbage collection. I don't know if they do that right now, but put out garbage cans, maybe even recycling and composting if that's an option. So maybe be health issues with that, but anyway. So consider those kind of options, maybe give and take even. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. We are done with Transportation Committee, so thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, and we'll consider ourselves adjourned. It's 8:24 p.m. Thank you very much. We'll see you Monday night.